Chapter 3. Where Feelings Begin. Where do feelings begin? Many of our feelings were established before we were born. We entered this realm with some of them. We were sensitive to the feelings our parents were experiencing during our gestation period, and these feelings often caused us to establish incorrect perceptions and beliefs at the time they were being experienced. How is this possible? The following information is from a collection of articles published in the last decade. Until recently, scientists believed that the infant was a virtual blank. And following Freud's dictum that only at 2 or 3 years of age could personality begin to form. Gradually, however, over the last 50 years, investigators have begun to break through the ignorance, preconceptions, and lack of data surrounding the prenatal and infant states to reveal a very different picture of these early stages of life. This emerging view gives a broader perspective on human consciousness and the intimate connections among human beings, as well as new insights into the meaning and responsibilities of parenthood. Recent research on infants show that even at birth the child has mastered many sophisticated physical and psychological skills. It's increasingly clear that the infant develops these skills in the prenatal period. In The Secret Life of the Unborn Child by Dr. Thomas Verney, tells us that the unborn child is not the passive, mindless creature of the traditional pediatric texts. Now we know that the unborn child is an aware, reacting human being who from the 6th month on, and perhaps even earlier, leads an active emotional life. Along with this startling finding, we've made these discoveries. The fetus can see, hear, experience, taste, and on a primitive level, even learn in utero. Most importantly, he can feel. Not with an adult sophistication, but feel nonetheless. Mysteries of Prenatal Consciousness by Sarah Bell Doherty, Sunrise Magazine, February-March 1990. The article discusses the unborn's development and his sensitivity to light at the 16th week of pregnancy. By the 4th month, the unborn baby has developed his basic reflexes, which allow facial expressions. By the 5th or 6th month, the unborn is as sensitive to touch as a newborn. From the 24th week on, he hears all the time, listening to the noises in his mother's body and to voices, music, etc. Between 28 to 34 weeks, his brain's neural circuits are as advanced as a newborn's, and the cerebral cortex is mature enough to support consciousness. A few weeks later, brain waves become distinct. Thus, throughout the 3rd trimester, he is equipped with most of the physiological capability of a newborn. Even more intriguing is evidence of the impact of the mother's and father's attitudes and feelings on their unborn child, based on the findings of many other researchers, as well as his own experience as a psychoanalyst. Dr. Verney presents evidence that the attitude of the mother toward the pregnancy and the child, as well as toward her partner, have a profound effect on the psychological development of the child and on the birth experience. The mother, by her patterns of feeling and behaving, is the chief source of the stimuli which shape the fetus. Communication between mother and her unborn child takes place in several ways. Physically, through hormones, for example. In behavior, the child's kicking, the mother's job and environmental situation. And sympathetically or intuitively, through love, ambivalence, dreams. One of the main means for communication of maternal attitudes and feelings is the neuro hormones the mother releases, which increase when she is under stress. These substances cross the placenta as easily as nutrients, alcohol, and other drugs do. In moderation, these hormones cause physiological reactions in the child, which stimulate his neural and psychological systems beneficially, but in excess, they can affect the developing body adversely. Because of the child's resilience, it is only extreme and generally long-lasting stress that leaves marked negative effects, not isolated thoughts or incidents. Moreover, the mother's love, acceptance, and positive thoughts for the unborn child act as a very strong protection, so he will continue to thrive even if her own situation is troubled. But if his needs for affection and attention are not met, his spirit and often his body also begin wilting. What the child experiences in the womb creates predispositions, expectations, and vulnerabilities rather than specific qualities. We're dealing with susceptibility, not predetermination. Increases in maternal neurohormones such as adrenaline, noradrenaline, and oxytocin do, however, heighten the child's biological susceptibility to emotional distress by altering the portion of the child's autonomic nervous system which controls physiological processes affecting personality structure. An excess of such maternal hormones has been related to low birth weight, reading difficulties, behavior problems, gastric disorders. Cigarette smoking, by reducing the amount of oxygen in the mother's blood, has been linked to anxiety in infants, traceable to the prenatal period. Most traumatic of all is when the mother, due to illness, a severe loss, or hostility to the pregnancy, withdraws her love and support from her unborn child. He then falls into a depression, is apt to emerge as an apathetic newborn, and may be plagued with depression throughout his life. In one case, a newborn girl refused to bond with or nurse from her own mother, though she did not refuse other women. The mother, it turned out, had wanted to have an abortion and bore the child grudgingly at the father's insistence. With such mothers, the child lacks a feeling person to whom he can attach himself. His mother becomes absorbed in herself and has no resources left for the baby. Nor can he bond with a woman overburdened with anxiety or frustration. The unborn child appears to distinguish very clearly between different types of maternal stress. He's affected most strongly by the mother's negative or ambivalent attitude toward the pregnancy, and also by a stressful relationship between the mother and her partner, or by a habitually high level of anxiety and fear. As Dr. Verney puts it, if loving, nurturing mothers bear more self-confident, secure children, it is because the self-aware I of each infant is carved out of warmth and love. Similarly, if unhappy, depressed, or ambivalent mothers bear a higher rate of neurotic children, it is because their offspring's egos were molded in moments of dread and anguish. Not surprisingly, without redirection, such children often grow into suspicious, anxious, and emotionally fragile adults. He further informs us that the second most important prenatal influence is the father's attitude toward the pregnancy and his commitment to the relationship with the mother. One investigator has estimated from his studies that women trapped in a stormy marriage run a 237% greater risk of bearing a psychologically or physically damaged child than a woman in a secure, nurturing relationship, putting her child at greater risk than would many physical illnesses, smoking, or very heavy manual labor. The article continues, the birth experience itself is influential. Very detailed birth memories can be retrieved, and the more traumatic the birth experience, the higher the correlation with physiological and psychological problems, including serious disorders, such as schizophrenia and psychosis. Again, the mother's attitude has been demonstrated to be the most important factor in determining the character of the birth. The vital factors in predicting the ease and speed of labor are the mother's attitude toward motherhood, her relations to her own mother, and the presence of habitual worries, fears, and anxieties going beyond normal apprehension. Along with these, women trapped in an unsatisfying relationship fall into the high-risk category. Many problems associated with birth trauma can be prevented or reduced by increased understanding and sensitivity on the part of health professionals and by the parent's choice of who delivers the baby and of a humane and comfortable birth method and location. That prenatal experiences carry over after birth is beyond dispute. As case histories illustrate, in one, a man troubled with severe anxiety attacks, accompanied by hot flushes, was regressed by hypnosis to the prenatal period and revealed that the underlying trauma had occurred in the 7th month of pregnancy. His mother subsequently admitted trying to abort him in the 7th month by taking hot baths. Such lost memories form the record of prenatal consciousness, and they can influence us powerfully all our lives. Why is it, however, that adults almost universally have no memory of these formative experiences without the aid of hypnosis? Certain drugs or various psychoanalytical techniques, memories retrieve from the 6th and particularly the 8th month, showing that the brain is operating near adult levels. One of the hormones which induce labor, oxytocin, has been found to wipe out memory. During labor, the child's system is flooded with this chemical. Another maternal hormone, ACTH, which regulates the flow of stress hormones, has the opposite effect, helping to retain memory. Thus, each time the mother becomes frightened or stressed, large amounts of the hormone flood into the child's system, helping him to retain a clear, vivid mental picture of her upset and its effect on him, and this is very significant. Interestingly, psychiatrists who regularly regress patients to birth and pre-birth often report on experiences that appear to go back as far as conception. Dr. Verney hypothesizes another intuitive form of memory, which can be stored on a cellular level, allowing even an ovum or sperm to record and retain memories. The memory is recorded in the DNA, which we will discuss further. The bonding between father and child also begins prenatally, when a man had spoken to his child before birth, using short, soothing words. The child 1 or 2 hours old picked out and responded to his voice. With both parents, attention to the child is critical in the first 4 years of life. Next to genetic inheritance, in fact, quality of parenting is the single most important factor in shaping the depth and breadth of intellect. Empathy with the child, and ability to see things from his perspective, are key factors to parents' success in stimulating and interacting with their children. There's a marked correlation between rejecting or stressed mothers and traumatic births on the one hand, and later psychological problems and even violent criminal activity on the other. A more active, supportive attitude toward unborn children would have a positive impact on society as a whole by preventing or mitigating destructive personality tendencies, and by giving children a start which meets their needs as human beings, not just as higher animals. Parenthood, then, from its earliest stages, is an inner as well as a physical responsibility, although the influence of physical substances such as drugs, including alcohol and tobacco, viruses and nutrients on the well-being of the unborn is generally recognized. We're only beginning to realize the parent's tremendous impact along psychological and spiritual lines. Dr. Verney points out several practical applications of this knowledge, such as providing psychological screening to locate emotionally high-risk mothers so that counseling could be offered to them, and steps taken to enhance the psychological and physical development of the child, and also increasing use of more humane, gentle birth practices on the part of the medical professionals. His most insistent message, however, is that each individual parent can help by striving to provide a positive, loving, psychological environment for the unborn child and infant. Widespread recognition of the delicate and intimate connections between parent and child prenatally and in infancy will lead naturally to a more realistic idea of the far-reaching responsibility of parenthood and a new respect for the impact of our inner life on those around us. We're definitely influenced before we are born. We actually enter this realm with predispositions and vulnerabilities. We were sensitive to the feelings our parents were experiencing during our gestation period, often establishing perceptions as they occurred. And how is this possible? According to The Incredible Machine, published by the National Geographic Society, an adult human is an assemblage of some 100 trillion cells. In every cell there exists a universal pattern of intelligence. This intelligence has been labeled DNA. There are at least 6 billion steps of DNA in a single cell, record one life's blueprint. The Incredible Machine tells us, through segments called genes, DNA determines the makeup of every cell and the hereditary traits of each one of us. DNA dictates the protein mix that fulfills our genetic inheritance. This book further instructs us that the DNA has 2 key roles: to direct the creation of protein and to duplicate itself. The DNA acts as a pattern for the formation of a chemical relative of DNA, messenger RNA, mRNA. The RNA bears its coded message to its destination and transfers the message to a transfer tRNA to be decoded. Dr. Deepak Chopra, MD, in his wonderful book Quantum Healing, puts it this way. RNA's mission is to travel away from the DNA in order to produce the proteins. More than 2 billion in number, they actually bind and repair the body. RNA is like active knowledge in comparison to DNA's silent intelligence. This is how the cells know how and in what way to function, not only during times of development, but in times of sickness, trauma, emotional stress, accidents, healing, and regenerating. In other words, the DNA is the blueprint, and the RNA carries out the building instructions. There's a mind-body connection to the DNA. We can liken it unto a radio broadcast. According to Dr. Chopra, the mind is sending out impulses of intelligence. DNA receives them. Dr. Chopra further states, you may not think that you can talk to your DNA, but in fact you do continually. Thinking happens at the level of DNA, because without the brain cell sending out a neuropeptide or other messengers, there can be no thought. Everything in life pours out of DNA: flesh, bones, blood, heart, and nervous system, a baby's first word and a toddler's first step, the maturing of reason in the brain's cortex, the play of emotions, thoughts and desires that flicker like summer lightning through every cell. All of this is DNA. Every thought, every feeling, and every emotion we experience sends a message to each cell in our body. Some messages are more intense and more deeply seated than others, but each cell is nonetheless affected, either adversely or conversely, negatively or positively. It is not necessary for us to be consciously aware of the message that our cells are receiving. The cells are still being affected. Each DNA and subsequently each cell is impacted by every thought, every feeling, and every emotion we experience. The message response from the thought, from the feeling or emotion that was sent to the cells of the body is registered in the DNA of the cell. The depth and the strength of the message that each cell receives is determined by the intensity of the response to the message and the intensity of the feeling that's connected with it. This message is then imprinted in the memory of each cell and creates an identity and an energy all its own. This cell memory is automatically and unconsciously referred back to when the need arises. This same cell memory thereby governs our beliefs and attitudes, which then directs our behavior from that point on throughout our life. Barbara Ann Brennan, physicist, therapist, healer, research scientist for NASA, and author of Hands of Light, tells us that we as human beings create according to our beliefs. She explains that the creation or manifestation of disease takes place when a concept or belief is transmitted, resonated, or broadcast from the mental, emotional, or other aspect of our being into the physical energy field. This information will become more meaningful, and you will gain a clearer understanding as you continue to read. But for right now, how does this relate to the feelings or thoughts of the parents affecting an unborn child? To begin with, we all recognize that the sperm is a cell and the ova is an egg, is also a cell. Thousands of DNA steps make up a single gene housed in that cell, and tens of thousands of genes transmit instructions for that cell's existence. These genes have their own programming or genetic coding, which has already been established by the DNA. When the sperm and the ova meet, they combine prior individual genetic coding programming from two different people, mom and dad. This definite genetic programming is further affected by the feelings that mom and dad are individually and collectively experiencing during gestation. As shown at the beginning of the chapter, the fetus then senses what is taking place in the parents' lives and can be dramatically affected by the feelings and emotions of the parents at this particular time. Wouldn't it be ideal and wonderful if the lives of everyone expecting a baby were going smoothly and brimming with happiness? Fortunate are those who had this experience. But alas, often this is not the case. Let's look at some possible conditions that might exist during those 9 months of gestation. Many couples are confronted with stressful challenges during these 9 months. Some may have difficult marriage adjustments. There could be heartache from the loss of a loved one. Other parents might be experiencing serious problems or concerns with older children. Financial struggles are very often a major issue. Some have a great deal of family discord. Desertion or abandonment is not uncommon. There is the possibility of resentment when mother finds herself pregnant, which could cause the baby to feel unloved, not wanted, or rejected. Think of the untold numbers of unwanted pregnancies. I've even counseled people who picked up the feeling of rejection from one of their parents or both, who wanted the opposite sex of what they were. As you can see, the factors influencing feelings in the unborn child are many and varied. If you have had children, consider some of the feelings and emotions that you went through while you were expecting these children. Or would you rather forget? Consider what your parents were experiencing During your gestation period, these feelings and emotions do have an effect on the unborn baby, and the effect can be an overwhelming motivator in the life of a person. For 9 months, there's an incubation period, not only for creating a child, but creating the feelings and predispositions which arrive with a child. During these 9 months, the baby is incapable of rational thinking, but the baby, feels. Then add to this the trauma of the birth. According to Joseph Clinton Pierce in his book, Magical Child, as the infant prepares for birth, it goes into an extreme stress state. This stimulates the ACTH to flow from the adrenal glands, preparing the body for drastic physical changes, alerting the body and brain of the infant for fight or flight, to accomplish the fast work that has to be done. And the high-stress state the unborn infant body is in at the point prepares the infant to be highly receptive and very desperate for nurturing stimuli that will reduce the stress. What is that particular stimulus they are needing? Where does it come from? The human mother is genetically programmed to nurture the newborn's body by a continual gentle message and stimulation. This is what has been found in non-technical countries. Indeed, it creates a bonding, holding with a body molding of the infant to oneself, prolonged and steady eye contact, smiling and soothing sounds are other ways of bonding, according to Zaslow and Breaker in their brilliant study of infantile autism. Breastfeeding, of course, furnishes all these at once. Body stimulus is what needs to be added to the vital body molding contact. Not only were most of these elements missing in birth for a great many years, but during the process of birth, the procedure for delivery was often seriously delayed and complicated. Drugs, particularly anesthetics, specifically slow up the synchronous movements by which the infant is expelled from the womb, and delivery gets extended to tortuous lengths. Fear and anxiety build in the mother, and pain follows swift and sure. The pain calls for more medication, as does massive outpouring of adrenal steroids preparatory to the great push in adaptation. But the movement does not come. The baby's body continues its outpouring of hormones. Stress piles on stress. The expected natural cycle of stress relaxation is not forthcoming. After hours of this, both mother and infant are exhausted. Then there are all the medical interferences, the carelessness and the callousness, coupled with the conditioning reflex of fear and the operating amphitheater atmosphere, that deadly table, and being forced to lie down or even be strapped down, which completely eliminates any last hope of muscular coordination. This is followed by drugs that incapacitate both mother and infant. The average anesthetic passes through the placenta to the infant in 45 seconds, long before deliverance. Mother and infant have been kept at a climactic point of tension, able to achieve no resolution. After the natural expulsion process is thoroughly fouled up, Mr. Pierce explains, instrumentation like forceps and suction machines are casually used to claw or suck the infant out of the mother's body. That beautiful, very sensitive, fragile, precious little head is grabbed in order to expel it, and the mother undergoes an episiotomy, which cuts the mother in a manner that would be considered major surgery at other times. This often causes permanent damage. How sad, especially when, according to Pierce, only in a rare emergency should an episiotomy be justified. The semi-drugged, overstressed, exhausted infant is, of course, generally unable to get his breath, even if given ample time to do so. the many new, unused coordinates of muscles are confused and malfunctioning. His body is reacting only. All synchronous interactions have long since been destroyed. In addition to his prolonged body fear of oxygen deprivation, when he is finally sucked or clawed out of the mother, his entry is into a noisy, brilliantly lit arena of masked creatures and humming machines. The hum of fluorescent lighting alone is an overload, much less fluorescence itself, which, as the world's greatest authority on lighting, John Ott, makes perfectly clear, is disastrous to infants. Do you think the baby has any feelings during this process? Of course it does. What could some of these feelings be? The feeling could possibly be fear, due to the sensation of choking to death with the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, or the fear could be from being separated from its source and then its mother. One of the more recent findings that sheds more light on the significant impact of a baby's birth is that the minute the baby's skin is exposed to the Earth's atmosphere at birth, there's an automatic reflex that starts the breathing process. If a baby is born breech, naturally it would inhale before its head was out of the birth canal, where fluid is possibly present. The baby may then have the sensation of drowning due to inhalation of fluid. The baby can also feel anger at a number of things, having to be separated from its source, having to come here, having to go through the trauma of birth, having to leave its mother, etc. Suffice it to say, whatever feelings baby is experiencing at birth, with the first breath the baby takes, this feeling is sealed in the flesh, its body, encoded in every cell of the body. This feeling that is established in the DNA initiates in the baby the core root of a presupposition or belief system that becomes forever after the eyeglasses through which he views his life. This feeling literally governs the road he travels for the rest of his life. The beliefs or presuppositions we buy at birth literally move us through life subconsciously, creating situations that validate these core beliefs. Example, I had a 44-year-old client who had been born 2 months premature. In the process of counseling Gail, we found that one of the behavior patterns that frustrated her the most about herself was that she could never see anything to completion. Gail simply had a difficult time finishing things in all the aspects of her life. We found the reason for this behavior went right back to her birth. It was as if I had been looking out a dark window all my life, unable to see clearly. Gail's words in describing it, she literally was unable to envision herself completing things. When she realized how her premature beginning had affected her whole life's pattern, what her incorrect perception had done to her relationships, she was in the process of her second divorce, and other aspects of her life, all of a sudden the dark window was filled with light. She felt a great sense of relief. The light appeared because Gail finally came to an understanding of why she could not finish commitments. She had not seen her gestation period to completion. So for some unknown reason, the belief she established, the master program that kicked in at birth, was for her to not complete important events, relationships, or responsibilities. This behavior had carried on throughout Gail's entire life, in everything she did. The significance of this will become clearer later on. Now back to Mr. Pierce. Suction devices are rammed into the mouth and nose. The eyelids are peeled back to that blinding, painful light, and far more painful chemicals dropped into the open eyes. He's held by the heels and beat on the back or subjected to a mechanical respirator. At this critical, oxygen-short period, The umbilical cord has been cut. He's cleaned up a bit from the blood of the episiotomy, which will knock his mother out of the picture for quite some time. Placed on cold, hard scales to be weighed like any other piece of meat in a factory. Bundled off to a nursery crib, screaming in pain and terror if he's lucky. Or rushed, semi-conscious and half dead, to an incubator, far worse fate than a crib, if he is less lucky. He has moved from a soft, warm, dark, quiet, and totally nourishing place into a harsh, sensory overload. He's physically abused, violated in a side variety of ways, subjected to specific physical pain and insult, all of which could still be overcome. But he is then isolated from his mother. During this process, an important network of nerve cells, called the reticular activating system, is dramatically influenced in the baby. This system helps keep the brain awake and alert, and helps regulate and coordinate many brain functions. It brings together information from different parts of the brain and from the sense organs, coordinating sensory messages and helping regulate the activity of the brain. Nerve fibers from the reticular system lead down the spinal cord to control the excitability of the spinal cord and the position and tension of muscles. This reticular activating system is the system that filters whether we come into the world with love-based feelings and emotions or fear-based feelings and emotions during our birth. And of course, the emotion that we unconsciously designate or select at this time is determined by our experiences during the birthing process and immediately thereafter. This is why it is of paramount importance for the baby to be held next to the mother's heart or the pulse beat that he is so familiar with from the 9 months gestation, and to be comforted by the mother for at least 45 minutes after his birth. If this comfort takes place, the baby has a much better chance of embracing love-based feelings and emotions rather than fear-based feelings and emotions. As an example of a baby remembering what transpired during his beginnings on earth, neighborhood friends of ours had a baby boy after having had 3 girls. Needless to say, they were ecstatic. However, this baby boy, whom we will call Kyle, had some problems at birth which made it necessary for him to remain in the hospital for an extended period of time, during which he was kept in an incubator. Kyle was about 26 months old when his mother was showing him a collection of pictures in a scrapbook that she had just completed, of those early days of his life in the hospital, when he looked at the very first page and saw the graphic pictures of himself in an incubator with life support systems hooked up to him. He started crying and blubbering. Baby wants his mommy. Baby wants his mommy. The buried feelings which he had experienced during those first few days of life in the hospital were emerging with great intensity. The memory of Kyle's ordeal flooded through him with attending feelings, and he was extremely distraught over feeling those feelings again, ones he had experienced in the hospital. His expression of baby wants his mommy is a pretty good indication of the message that he would have liked to have been able to communicate but yet couldn't, as he was going through those first few days of his life. Back to Mr. Pierce. It's impossible to overstate the monstrousness of this final violation of a new life. No book can ever express the full ramifications of this crime against nature. This isolation neatly cancels every possible chance for bonding, for relaxation of the birth stress, for the activation of the sensory system, for its extrauterine function, and for the completion of the reticular formation, for full mental, physical coordinates and learning. The failure to return to the known matrix, the mother, sets into process a chain reaction from which that organism never fully recovers. All future learning is affected. the infant body goes into shock. The absorbent mind shuts down. There will be little absorption again because there's only trauma and pain to be absorbed. The infant then surely exhibits only two states: fulfilling Spitz's expectations, quiescence, which means semi to full unconsciousness and unpleasure. If awakened from his survival retreat from consciousness, he is propelled back into a state of unresolved high stress. He cries himself to sleep again. Pleasure and smiling will surely be much later in appearing. Just about 2.5 months later, because it'll take that long for his unstimulated and isolated body to compensate if it is to survive at all. The infant's body must manage slowly to bring its own sensory system to life. During this period of shock, sensory closure, and retrenchment, there is virtually no development. How could there be? And all the other pre-programmed, stage-specific developments are systematically missed, throwing the system farther behind. We could go on and on. Some might say that Mr. Pierce is very extreme and overdramatic in his description of this process. There is, however, a large segment of the population that experienced birth the way he describes it. He does paint a graphic and vivid picture of those first few hours of life for the hospital-born infant, at least the way it used to be. Perhaps the emotion with which he describes it is an indication of the depth of his feeling as to the injustice of the situation and the damage it has done and can do. With all of the foregoing in mind, try to imagine how this scenario impacts the feelings of the helpless infant. No wonder rebirthing centers have become so popular. No wonder countless people are striving to find the cause of their discomfort, their emptiness, and their suffering. Undoubtedly, they are looking for that comfort they never received at birth, the comfort and bonding that they were never allowed to experience. During our very earliest moments of life, whatever the situation was, our perception of life began. Our natural drive, however, was and is to return to the place of comfort and peace. To return to comfort, period. The place where we felt peace, love, tranquility, and happiness, whether that realm was before the womb or in the womb. While being hurled through those first few experiences in life, we naturally drew conclusions about our new sphere of existence, whether the comfort took place or whether it didn't. If this comfort did take place, or however it took place, has greatly determined the way we see our world. The feelings we experienced as we went through the birthing process, and the events that immediately followed, were the basis of our perceptions. These perceptions then contributed to the foundation of our beliefs. Our beliefs are established from the silent conclusions we draw about our perceptions of what we feel. As we took our place on this earth, our daily experiences continued to validate or invalidate the beliefs we established in those first hours of life. The perceptions that created our beliefs and the degree to which they were validated soon determined the pattern or the roadmap which we have followed throughout our life. At this point you may be asking, is there something the matter with that? Recall, if you will, that feelings and thoughts have a definite energy, that your body's energy electrical system has a blueprint which requires it to be in balance and harmony if it is to function correctly. When negative fear-based feelings or thoughts are registered in the body, the perfect operating energy patterns, the circuits of the body, which keep it in balance, are adversely impacted. The electrical system is short-circuited, creating a block or a malfunction in the system. These blocks obscure the memory of perfection in the DNA of the cells. The original blueprint can no longer be adhered to, all of which adversely influences our behavior and our health. Each time a negative feeling, thought, belief is re-experienced and re-validated, the energy surrounding the original block is reinforced and compounded. Consequently, these energy blocks grow, becoming larger and more powerful with time, unless the energy of that particular block is changed. These energy blocks are the cause of our illnesses, our problems, and our challenges in life. How interesting, the detrimental effects of our fear-based feelings, that we could be continually thwarted by those earliest negative feelings and beliefs, until we become consciously aware of these blocks and their causative feelings and thoughts that are willing to transform the energy around them. These feelings and their effects will be our constant companions. Whatever you believe, with feeling, becomes your reality. You are the sum total result of all your belief systems to this moment. Your beliefs form a screen of logic or a screen of prejudices through which you see the entire world. You never allow in any information that is inconsistent with your beliefs, even if you have beliefs that are totally inconsistent with reality. To the degree to which you believe these things to be true, they become true for you. Michael Wickett, it's all within your reach.